Commander Katie Morrison stood on the bridge of the Valkyrie watching the enemy fleet through the massive view screen before her. 300 human warships had traveled across the galaxy for this moment, the final battle of a war that had lasted 30 long years. Before them floated over 2,000 alien vessels, ships belonging to the Covenant of Stars, an alliance of alien races that had been fighting humanity since the first colony worlds were established. Katie took a deep breath and gripped the armrest of her command chair. Her crew waited in tense silence. Every weapon on every human ship was charged and ready. Lieutenant Amy Chen sat at the tactical station, her fingers hovering over the firing controls. Dr. Lisa Brennan stood near the science station, her eyes fixed on the readings that made no sense. In the center of the enemy formation was something strange, a massive structure that pulsed with violet light. It was not like any ship or station they had ever seen. The structure seemed to shimmer, as if it existed in multiple places at once. Katie had received reports about this thing. Intelligence suggested it was some kind of superweapon, something the Covenant had been building in secret for decades. Among the enemy fleet hidden inside a captured Covenant vessel was someone unexpected. Alindra pressed her hand against the cold metal wall and closed her eyes. She could feel it. The gate was active. The fools had actually turned it on. Her pointed ears twitched as she heard the power building. Beside her in the shadows, something massive stirred. Vorithix the dragon opened one silver eye and rumbled deep in his chest. The midnight scales of his body seemed to absorb all light around him. Alindra had disguised him using ancient magic. To sensors, he would appear as nothing more than a malfunction, a glitch in the readings. She had been hunting this gate for 300 years, always arriving too late, always finding worlds already emptied, civilizations displaced into the dark. But this time she had arrived before activation. This time she could stop it, or so she had thought. The Covenant had activated it anyway despite her sabotage attempts. Now it was too late for anything except damage control. Katie opened the communication channel. She was about to broadcast the final ultimatum: surrender or be destroyed. But before the first word left her mouth, everything changed. The alien fleet vanished. Not slowly, not ship by ship. Every single vessel blinked out of existence in the span of a single heartbeat. 2,000 warships. The mysterious violet structure. All of it simply gone. The human fleet floated in empty space. Alarms should have been screaming. Weapons should have been firing. Instead, there was only silence. Katie stared at the empty void where an entire armada had been moments before. Amy Chen frantically worked her controls, running scan after scan. Nothing. No debris field. No energy signatures. No gravitational distortions. Dr. Brennan stumbled forward, her voice shaking as she reported the impossible. The mass equivalent of 2,000 starships had simply ceased to exist. It violated every law of physics humanity understood. Commander Melissa Drake, the chief of security, activated every sensor the Valkyrie had. She searched for cloaking devices, for dimensional shifts, for anything that could explain what they had just witnessed. Nothing made sense. Katie forced herself to think, to push past the shock and confusion. Her crew needed orders. The fleet needed direction. Then a single contact appeared. On sensors, small, adrift. A vessel that had not been there a moment before. Or perhaps it had been there all along, hidden somehow among the Covenant ships. Amy Chen reported that the vessel appeared to be powerless. No weapons active, no shields, just drifting in the void. Katie made a decision that would change everything. She ordered the vessel brought aboard the Valkyrie. Melissa Drake immediately protested. It could be a trap, a bomb, anything. But Katie had learned to trust her instincts over 3 decades of war. Something about this felt important. The salvage team brought the alien vessel into the main hangar bay. Security teams surrounded it with weapons ready. When they opened the hatch, they found her. A woman unlike any human. Her skin had a faint glow as if lit from within. Pointed ears swept back from a face that was both beautiful and otherworldly. Her eyes were closed, but even unconscious she seemed to radiate an aura of age, of vast time and deep sorrow. She wore armor that looked organic, as if grown rather than forged. In her hands she clutched a crystal that pulsed with the same violet light as the structure that had vanished. Dr. Nicole Patterson, the xenobiologist, rushed forward. She had never seen anything like this being. The genetic scans were unlike anything in their databases. Not Covenant. Not any known species. Something else entirely. Something older. As the medical team lifted the woman onto a stretcher, the crystal slipped from her fingers. It hit the deck and rang like a bell. The sound echoed through the hangar. For just a moment, less than a second, the sensors picked up something massive in the cargo bay. Something with a heat signature like a fusion reactor. Something reptilian and ancient. Then it was gone. Vanished from the sensors as if it had never been there. Melissa Drake ordered a full sweep of the cargo bay. Her teams found nothing. No sign of anything alive. No heat signature. Nothing. But 3 of her officers swore they had seen something in the shadows. Something with silver eyes that watched them. Something that had scales like midnight and fire in its breath. Katie stood in the hangar looking down at the unconscious woman. At the crystal, now secured in a containment field. At the empty space where her enemy had been. The war was supposed to be over. Humanity was supposed to have won. Instead, she had more questions than answers. Who was this woman? Where had the Covenant fleet gone? What was the violet structure? And what had her sensors detected for that single impossible moment? As the medical team rushed the woman to the medical bay, Katie returned to the bridge. She looked out at the empty space. At the 300 human warships waiting for her orders, waiting to understand what had just happened. She did not have answers yet, but she would find them, even if it meant trusting an alien stranger, even if it meant accepting that humanity did not understand the universe as well as they thought. The war might be over, but something else had just begun, something bigger than any battle, something that would test everything humanity believed about reality itself. Katie gave the order to secure the fleet and begin analysis. She told her crew to prepare for anything, because in the span of a few heartbeats their understanding of the cosmos had been shattered, and the woman in their medical bay held the answers. Whether she would share them remained to be seen. The woman woke 12 hours later in the medical bay. Her eyes opened and shifted from violet to silver to deep blue. "Doctor." Nicole Patterson jumped back, startled by the change. The woman sat up slowly despite the restraints. She looked around the room with an expression of deep weariness, as if she had seen this scene 1,000 times before. Katie Morrison entered the medical bay with Melissa Drake at her side. The security chief had her hand on her weapon, ready for anything. Katie approached the bed carefully. She introduced herself and asked the woman for her name. The woman spoke in perfect English, her voice like music and old stones combined. She said her name was Alindra. When Katie asked what species she was, Alindra smiled sadly. She said her people walked between stars when humans still swam in ancient oceans. She called her race the Aethel. Katie had never heard of them. Neither had any of their databases. Alindra explained she had learned human languages by listening, by touching the dreams that humans broadcast into space without knowing. She said consciousness leaves echoes across the void, and she had been listening for a very long time. Melissa Drake demanded to know about the vanishing fleet. Her voice was hard. Suspicious. Alindra looked at her with those shifting eyes. Then her composure cracked. Her hands trembled. She told them she had not made the fleet disappear. She had tried to stop it, failed to prevent the activation. Katie felt a chill run down her spine. She asked what had happened to the Covenant ships. Alindra spoke of something called a Harbinger Gate, an ancient weapon created by a race that died before humans existed. The Covenant had found it buried on a dead world. They spent decades excavating it, believing it would grant them ultimate power. They were fools. The gate did not destroy. It displaced. Alindra explained that the entire Covenant fleet had been thrown somewhere else, not another place in normal space, but into something called the Void Between, a dimension where time did not exist, where sanity could not survive. The ships and their crews were not dead. They were somewhere worse, conscious and aware but trapped forever, trapped in living darkness with no hope of rescue, no possibility of escape. Katie wanted to dismiss it as madness, but Dr. Lisa Brennan had been analyzing the crystal. She interrupted with readings that confirmed the impossible. The crystal existed in multiple dimensions at once. It emitted energy signatures, consistent with controlled spatial ruptures, things that should not be possible, according to human science. Alindra reached for the crystal despite her restraints. She said it was a fragment of the gate core. She had managed to tear it free before the displacement occurred. It had cost her nearly everything to get it. Katie asked what she meant by nearly everything. Alindra did not answer. Instead, she revealed something worse. The gate had a failsafe built into it by its ancient creators. If the core was not restored within 7 days, the gate would activate again. But this time it would. Target something different. The largest concentration of sentient minds within 1,000 light years. Katie felt her blood turn cold. Earth and the 34 colony worlds. 12 billion human lives. All of them would follow the Covenant into the eternal darkness. Melissa Drake called it a lie. A trick to gain sympathy. But Dr. Brennan showed them the mathematical models. The energy patterns in the crystal. The projections all pointed to the same conclusion. If Alindra spoke the truth, then humanity had less than a week to live. Katie asked if the gate could be destroyed. Alindra shook her head. She explained that the gate existed partially outside normal space. Any attack would only trigger it prematurely. The only way to stop it was to restore the core fragment. To manually shut down the gate from within its control systems. Before Katie could ask more questions, the lights flickered. A sound echoed through the ship, deep and resonant like thunder underground. Security alarms blared across all decks. Melissa Drake grabbed her communicator and demanded a status report. The response made her face go pale. Something massive had appeared in the detention block. Something that had not been there moments before. The security feeds showed Alindra's cell, or what had been her cell. Now it was filled with coils of muscle, midnight scales that gleamed under the lights. A dragon, 50 feet of ancient power, silver eyes that burned with protective fury. The creature had wrapped itself around Alindra protectively, its head lowered to face the security cameras. When it opened its mouth, silver fire dripped from its jaws. Melissa Drake ordered her teams to fall back, to bring heavy weapons. Katie held up her hand. She looked at Alindra, who had closed her eyes in resignation. The commander asked who or what that creature was. Alindra whispered a single word. Vorathix. She said he was her companion, her friend, the only family she had left in all the cosmos. Katie made a decision that nearly caused a mutiny among her crew. She ordered everyone to stand down. To lower their weapons, Melissa Drake argued loudly. The thing was dangerous, a threat to the entire ship. But Katie had seen something in those silver dragon eyes. Not malice, not hunger, only fierce protection. She walked alone to the detention block. Her crew protested, but she went anyway. She stood before the massive dragon, before scales that could turn aside plasma fire, before jaws that could bite through starship hull. Vorathix watched her approach, his eyes never leaving hers. Katie spoke calmly. She said she meant Alindra no harm. She said humanity needed answers, needed help. The dragon rumbled deep in his chest. Then he spoke. His voice was old beyond measure. He said that Alindra had spent 3 centuries hunting the gates, trying to prevent what had happened to her own people. He said she was the last of the Aethel, the sole survivor of a species displaced into the void millennia ago. Everything she did, every risk she took, was to prevent others from suffering the same fate. Katie felt the weight of those words. She looked at Alindra, who had followed her to the detention block. The elf woman stood small and tired, ancient eyes in a young face. Katie asked if this was true, if she really was alone. Alindra nodded. She said her people had failed to stop the first gate activation. An entire civilization vanished in moments. She survived only because she had been far from their homeworld, studying the gates, trying to understand them. By the time she returned home, there was nothing, just empty cities and silence. She had been searching ever since, trying to seal the gates, trying to save others from the fate her people suffered. Katie made her choice then, not as a military commander, but as someone who understood loss, who understood the burden of responsibility. She offered Alindra an alliance. Humanity would help her stop the gate. In return, Alindra would share what she knew about the ancient weapons, about the dangers lurking in the cosmos. Melissa Drake protested again. They could not trust an alien, could not risk everything on a stranger word. But Katie had seen enough war to know when someone was telling the truth. She saw it in Alindra's eyes, in the way Vorathix stood guard over his friend. This was not deception. This was desperation. Alindra accepted the alliance. She warned them it would be dangerous, that entering the void between was lethal to most life. Human biology would survive perhaps 4 minutes before breaking down. Standard military armor might extend that to 6. Not enough time, but she could survive an hour. And Vorathix, being a dragon of dimensional spaces, could endure even longer. Together they might reach the stage. Control Nexus. Might complete the shutdown sequence. Katie asked what they needed. Alindra listed equipment. A ship capable of dimensional transit, volunteers willing to risk everything, and time. Always more time than they had. As preparations began, Katie stood with Alindra on the observation deck. The elf woman stared out at the stars. Katie asked why she cared so much about saving humanity. They were strangers, not her people. Alindra was quiet for a long moment. Then she said she saw in humanity the same potential that destroyed the ancients, the same capacity for greatness and terror. She refused to watch another species annihilate itself through arrogance. She refused to fail again. Katie placed a hand on her shoulder. She promised they would succeed. Together, Alindra smiled. A small, sad smile. She said she hoped that was true, because the alternative was unthinkable. Somewhere in the dark, Vorithix watched over them both, his silver eyes reflecting starlight, his ancient heart beating steady, ready for whatever came next. The revelation of Vorithix nearly tore the crew apart. Half the officers wanted to jettison both dragon and elf into space. The other half stood, with Katie decision. Melissa Drake found herself caught between duty and instinct. She had seen too much war to trust easily, but she had also seen the terror in Alindra's eyes when speaking of the void. That kind of fear could not be faked. The conference room was tense when they gathered. Katie sat at the head of the table. Alindra stood near the viewport. Vorithix coiled in the corner of the room, his massive form somehow fitting into a space that should have been too small. Dr. Lisa Brennan presented her findings. The crystal fragment showed temporal distortions, energy signatures that existed outside normal physics. If Alindra was lying, she had somehow created evidence that defied human understanding. Lieutenant Amy Chen asked the question everyone was thinking. How could they trust an alien they just met? An alien who appeared the moment their enemy vanished. Alindra met her gaze steadily. She said they could not trust her based on words alone. Only actions would prove her intent. She offered to share everything she knew about the Harbinger Gates, about the ancient races that built them, about the dimensional sciences her people had mastered. Dr. Nicole Patterson leaned forward eagerly, the xenobiologist in her desperate to learn, but Melissa Drake remained skeptical. She pointed out that sharing knowledge cost Alindra nothing. What guarantee did they have she would actually help? Vorithix spoke then, his voice rumbling through the room like distant thunder. He said his companion had sacrificed 3 centuries hunting these gates. She had walked into war zones and dying stars. She had faced creatures that would drive humans mad with fear, all to prevent what happened to her people from happening to others. If humanity could not see the truth in that, then they deserved their fate. The blunt words shocked the room into silence. Katie broke it by asking Alindra to explain the full scope of the crisis. The elf woman moved to the holographic display. She brought up an image of the Harbinger Gate, a massive crystalline structure that hurt to look at, as if it existed in too many dimensions at once. She explained that the gates could not be destroyed by conventional means. They were anchored in dimensional boundaries. Part of them existed in normal space, part in the void between, part in dimensions humans had no names for. Any attack would destabilize the anchoring, cause the gate to activate immediately in self-defense. Dr. Brennan asked about the shutdown procedure. Alindra's face darkened. She said the only way to stop a gate was to reach its control nexus. The nexus existed at the boundary between normal space and the void. To reach it, someone had to enter the void itself, navigate through the dimensional chaos, find the nexus among the screaming darkness, and manually input the shutdown sequence. All while the void tried to tear them apart, molecule by molecule. Amy Chen did the math quickly. She reported that standard human biology would last 4 minutes maximum. Military-grade power armor might extend survival to 6 minutes. Environmental suits with dimensional shielding perhaps 8. None of it was enough time. The nexus, according to Alindra's schematics, would take at least 20 minutes to reach, another 10 to navigate, another 15 to complete the shutdown, 45 minutes minimum. Katie asked if there was any other way. Alindra shook her head. She had searched for 300 years. This was the only method that worked. Her people, the Aethel, had evolved in dimensional boundaries. Their biology could withstand the void for limited periods. She personally could survive perhaps an hour before her cells began breaking down. Vorithix, being a dragon of the deep dark, could last even longer. Perhaps 2 hours. Perhaps more. He had never tested his limits. Together they could reach the nexus, complete the mission, save Earth and the colonies. But they would need support, a ship to carry them to the gate, equipment to help navigate the void, and backup in case something went wrong. Melissa Drake pointed out the obvious problem. If Alindra and Vorethix went alone and failed, everyone died. But if humans went with them, the humans would die in the void. It was an impossible situation. Katie stood and declared she would go. Melissa tried to argue, but Katie cut her off. She was the fleet commander. She would not order others into danger. She would not face herself. Dr. Brennan volunteered next. She said the mission needed someone who understood the science, who could adapt if the shutdown procedure did not work as planned. Melissa Drake cursed but added her name to the list. If her commander was going to certain death, she would be there too. Alindra protested. She said humans would only slow them down, would die before reaching the Nexus. But Katie had already made up her mind. She ordered the engineering teams to modify an assault shuttle, add dimensional stabilizers, enhance the hull shielding, create whatever protections human science could manage, even if it only bought them a few extra minutes. Over the next 3 days, the crew worked without sleep. Engineers pushed the shuttle beyond safe specifications. Dr. Brennan developed a serum that might slow cellular breakdown. It was untested, possibly lethal on its own, but dying slowly was better than dying instantly. Alindra spent hours teaching them about the void, about what they would face. She warned them that the void fed on consciousness. It would show them things, terrible things, beautiful things, things pulled from their deepest fears and strongest desires. Most who entered the void went mad before their bodies failed. She taught them meditation techniques, mental exercises to maintain their sense of self, to remember what was real and what was illusion. Vorethix watched the preparations with ancient eyes. He approved of the human determination. Their refusal to accept death without fighting, it reminded of Alindra when he first met her, centuries ago when she was young and burning with righteous fury, before time and failure had worn her down. On the night before the mission, Katie found Alindra alone on the observation deck. The elf woman stared at the stars, her reflection ghostly in the viewport. Katie asked if she was afraid. Alindra laughed, a sound like breaking glass. She said she had been afraid for 300 years. Fear was an old companion now. Katie asked about Vorethix, about their bond. Alindra was quiet for a long time. Then she told the story. 3 centuries ago she had found the dragon wounded, dying on a forgotten moon. His own kind had abandoned him, left him to fade into nothing. She saved him, healed him with aethal techniques, gave him purpose when he had none. In return, he chose to follow her, not as a servant, not as a pet, but as a friend, the only constant in her long hunt across the stars. Katie said she understood loss. She had lost friends in the war, lost family to the Covenant, but 3 centuries of solitude seemed unbearable. Alindra smiled sadly. She said you learned to bear the unbearable, or you broke. She had come close to breaking, many times, but Vorethix always pulled her back, reminded her why she kept fighting. Now she would ask him to face the greatest danger yet, and she was terrified of losing him. Katie promised they would all come back. All of them. Alindra wanted to believe her, but she had made too many promises she could not keep, lost too many people she tried to save. Hope was a luxury she could not afford. The next morning they boarded the modified shuttle. Katie took the pilot seat. Melissa handled weapons and shields. Dr. Brennan managed the dimensional equipment. Alindra sat in the center, the crystal fragment in her hands. Vorethix flew alongside the shuttle, his form visible through the viewport, silver fire trailing from his wings. The fleet watched them depart, 300 warships holding position, waiting to see if their commander would return, or if they would witness the end of everything. Katie plotted a course to the gate location. The coordinates Alindra provided. As they flew through space, Katie asked one final question. What happened to Alindra people? Why did she survive when they did not? The elf woman closed her eyes. She said she had been away from home, studying a gate, on the other side of the galaxy, trying to understand how they worked. When her people activated their own gate by accident, when she returned, there was nothing, just empty cities under alien stars. She spent a century searching the void for them, but the void is infinite, and her people were lost in its depths. She never found them, never even found a trace, so she dedicated herself to ensuring no one else suffered that fate, even if it cost her everything. Katie gripped the controls tighter. She understood now, understood the weight Alindra carried, and she vowed that this time would be different. This time they would succeed. Together, the gate appeared ahead, massive and wrong, pulsing with violet fire. The void awaited beyond, and with it, Their fate, the shuttle penetrated the dimensional barrier and reality shattered around them. Katie gripped the controls as the ship lurched violently. Warning alarms screamed across every system. The viewport showed something that should not exist. The void between was not empty darkness. It was alive. Writhing shadows that reached toward the shuttle with hungry intent. Whispers filled the cockpit. Voices speaking in languages that predated human existence. Dr. Brennan screamed. Katie turned to see the scientist staring at something only she could see. Her mother stood beside her seat. The woman who had died 20 years ago in a colony raid. She was reaching out, calling for her daughter, begging Lisa to join her. Melissa Drake drew her weapon, pointing it at enemies that were not there. The faces of every person she had killed during the war. They surrounded her, accusing her with silent bleeding mouths. Katie felt it too. A vision of Earth burning, the colonies dying one by one, her crew scattered across the void, all because she had failed them. A Lindra voice cut through the madness, sharp and commanding. She told them to focus on her voice, to remember what was real. The void fed on fear and guilt and desire. It pulled memories from their minds and gave them terrible form, but they were only illusions, shadows with no substance. Vorthix roared outside the shuttle. His silver fire blazed brighter, creating a sphere of protection around them. The worst of the void effects retreated, pushed back by the dragon ancient power. Katie forced herself to breathe, to ignore her mother voice calling from the shadows, to focus on flying the ship. Dr. Brennan injected herself with the serum she had developed. Her hands shook, but the hallucinations faded slightly. Melissa Drake lowered her weapon, her jaw clenched tight. They flew deeper into the dimensional chaos. Time behaved strangely here. Seconds stretched into hours. Minutes compressed into moments. The instruments gave contradictory readings, showing they had been in the void for days, or perhaps only heartbeats. Lindra guided them using senses humans did not possess. She could feel the dimensional currents, navigate by the flow of unreality itself. Then they saw the Covenant fleet. Katie's breath caught in her throat. 2,000 ships floated in impossible configurations, twisted and bent in ways that violated physics. Some were inside out, their crews visible through transparent hulls. Others were stretched across vast distances. A single ship elongated into a ribbon of metal and screaming souls. The crews were still alive. Katie could see them through the viewports. Some were frozen mid-scream, their faces locked in eternal terror. Others had clawed their own eyes out, trying to escape the visions the void showed them. A few still moved, performing their duties with mechanical precision, unaware they had been displaced from reality, unaware that time had lost all meaning. Melissa Drake's voice was hollow. She asked how long the Covenant had been here. Lindra said that in normal space only hours had passed. But in the void they had experienced decades, perhaps centuries. Time did not flow here. It pooled and stagnated. The Covenant crews had lived through eternities of madness, and they would continue living. Forever. Unless someone stopped the gate. Unless someone prevented more souls from joining them. Dr. Brennan was crying. She said no one deserved this fate, not even enemies. Not even the aliens who had killed billions of humans. This was worse than death. This was eternal suffering. Katie agreed. She flew past the dead fleet, steering toward where Lindra directed. The control nexus was ahead, a massive crystalline structure that pulsed with violet light. It was surrounded by automated defenses, ancient weapons that activated as they approached. Energy beams lanced through the void, cutting through the dimensional chaos. The shuttle shields flared as impacts hit home. Vorthix engaged the defenses. His silver fire met ancient plasma. The dragon was magnificent in battle, weaving through weapon fire with impossible grace. His flames consumed targeting systems, melted crystal barriers, but there were too many defenses. Even the dragon could not hold them all back. Katie made the decision. She and Melissa would provide cover fire with the shuttle, draw the automated weapons away from the Nexus entrance. Lindra and Dr. Brennan would infiltrate on foot, complete the shutdown sequence. Lindra protested immediately. She said humans could not survive direct exposure to the void. Their suits would fail. Their bodies would break down in minutes. But Katie was firm. She had not come this far to hide behind others. She was the fleet commander. She led from the front. Always. The shuttle bay opened. Lindra and Dr. Brennan jumped out. their environmental suits glowing with dimensional shielding. They landed on a surface that should not exist, a path made of frozen screams and crystallized time. Katie pushed the shuttle into a hard turn, firing weapons at the defense platforms, drawing their attention. Melissa worked the targeting systems with grim efficiency. Every shot counted. Every second they bought was precious. Inside the Nexus, Alindra and Dr. Brennan ran. The scientist was already struggling. Her suit indicators showed critical damage. The void was seeping in through microscopic cracks, eating away at the protective layers. Alindra pulled her forward, using her own body to shield the human. They reached the control chamber, a vast space filled with impossible geometry. The crystal fragment in Alindra's hands began to resonate. Pulling toward an empty slot in the central mechanism, Dr. Brennan scanned the systems, her scientific splang, mind trying to comprehend alien technology. She found the shutdown sequence. But it was complex. More complex than they had anticipated. It would take time. Time they did not have. Outside, Katie and Melissa fought desperately. The shuttle shields were failing. Hull breaches appeared as ancient weapons found their mark. Melissa reported they had maybe 3 minutes before catastrophic failure. Katie told her to keep firing, to give the infiltration team every second possible. In the control chamber, Dr. Brennan's suit finally failed. The void rushed in. Her skin began to crack. Blood vessels burst. Under her eyes, she screamed but kept working, kept analyzing the alien controls. Alindra placed the crystal fragment into the mechanism. It locked into place with a sound like reality breaking. The entire structure shuddered. And then Alindra saw it. The final piece of the puzzle. The truth she had suspected but never confirmed. The Harbinger gates could not be shut down remotely. Someone had to stay inside the void. Maintain the seal manually. Forever. The gates were not weapons. They were escape routes. Built by the elder races to flee some terrible threat. But the builders had miscalculated. The gates became prisons instead of passages. Anyone who tried to use them became trapped. Became part of the sealing mechanism. Alindra understood now why she had never found her people. They were here, scattered across 1,000 gates. Their consciousness woven into the dimensional fabric, maintaining seals they could never escape. She looked at Dr. Brennan. The scientist was dying, her suit completely breached, her body breaking down. But her eyes were clear. She understood too. Alindra made her choice. She began the shutdown sequence, locking her own consciousness into the mechanism. Dr. Brennan tried to stop her, tried to argue, but Alindra used the last of her power. She pushed the scientist back through dimensional space, threw her toward the shuttle, toward safety. Outside, Katie saw Dr. Brennan appear on the hull, unconscious but alive. Melissa pulled her inside just as the void erupted. Violet fire consumed everything. The Nexus, the defenses, the space around them. Katie hit the engines, pushing the shuttle toward the dimensional barrier, toward escape. Behind them, Vorethix roared, a sound of pure anguish. The dragon turned and dove back toward the collapsing Nexus, back toward Alindra. Katie screamed at him to stop. But dragons do not abandon their friends, even when it means their doom. The shuttle broke through the barrier into normal space. Alarms fading. Systems stabilizing. They were alive. But as Katie looked back at the dimensional rift, as she saw its ceiling behind them, she knew the price. Alindra and Vorethix were gone, trapped in the void, trapped forever, and there was nothing anyone could do to save them. Vorethix crashed through layers of collapsing dimensional barriers. His silver fire blazed against the consuming darkness. Reality bent and broke around him, but he did not stop, could not stop. His friend needed him. He found Alindra at the heart of the Nexus. Her hands fused to the control mechanism, her body beginning to fade as she held the gate sealed. She was singing, an ancient Ethel song of endings, beautiful and heartbreaking, a melody that spoke of sacrifice and eternal night. When she saw the dragon, her composure shattered. She screamed at him to leave, told him he could not save her, that the seal required conscious will to maintain. She had already committed herself, already bound her spirit to the gate, but Vorethix simply settled beside her, coiling his massive form around her failing body. His voice was gentle when he spoke. He said she would not face the dark alone, not while he had breath. Alindra wept then, truly wept for the first time in 300 years. She said she was sorry. Sorry for hunting the gate so long that she dragged him into this. Sorry that their friendship would end in this lightless place. Sorry she had failed to save her people when the first gate activated. She confessed the truth she had carried for centuries. The Aethel civilization had not been displaced by accident. They had activated their gate deliberately, trying to escape a threat she never understood. Her people had believed the gates would save them. Instead, the gates had consumed them, scattered them across dimensional boundaries, turned them into eternal prisoners. She was the last of her kind, the sole survivor, because she had been away studying the very weapons that destroyed her race. She had spent 3 centuries searching, trying to find a way to free them, trying to save them from their eternal torment. But she had failed, always failed, and now she would join them in the darkness. Vorethix revealed his own truth then. He said he was not her pet, not her servant. He had chosen to follow her because she saved him, gave him purpose when his own kind had abandoned him. Dragons did not die as other creatures did. Their consciousness persisted even when bodies failed, becoming one with the fundamental forces of reality. He could merge with the gate mechanism, use his immortal awareness to maintain the seal forever. But only if she left. Only if she lived and continued her vigil, continued ensuring no other gates activated. Aelindra refused. She could not let him sacrifice himself. Not for her. Not after everything he had given. They argued as reality crumbled around them. 2 ancient beings who had walked through stars together, who had faced horrors beyond human comprehension, who had become family in the vast loneliness of space, neither willing to abandon the other. Outside, Katie Morrison made a desperate choice. She ordered the entire fleet to fire on the dimensional barrier. Every weapon, every ship, 300 warships unleashing hell on the fabric of reality itself. Dr. Brennan, barely conscious, screamed that it would kill them. Both. That the dimensional rupture would destroy anything inside. Katie's voice was cold when she replied. Then they would give their friends a path out. She gave the order. Fire. 300 human warships opened fire as one. Plasma cannons, railguns, missiles, beam weapons. Everything humanity had built to wage war. All of it focused on a single point. The dimensional barrier cracked. Energy bled through. A new path opened. A way out. Inside the void, Aelindra felt the rupture. A chance. A single impossible chance for one of them to escape. Vorethix moved before she could think. He physically tore her hands from the control mechanism, ignoring her screams, ignoring the pain it caused them both. His consciousness flooded into the gate systems, becoming the seal, becoming eternal. With his last physical act, he threw Aelindra toward the rupture, toward the crack in reality, toward life. His final words echoed across dimensions. Live, little star. Be for others what you were for me. And remember, you were never alone. Aelindra screamed his name as she was pulled through, screamed until her voice broke, until she materialized on the Valkyrie bridge, until reality reasserted itself around her. But Vorethix was gone. The dimensional barrier sealed. The gate collapsed into dormancy, its violet glow fading to lifeless gray. The threat to Earth was over. But the cost broke her. 3 months passed. Katie Morrison stood before the United Earth Council, defending her decisions, defending the trust she placed in an alien stranger. The council was divided. Some called her a hero who saved humanity. Others called her a fool who wasted resources on unverified threats. But when Aelindra testified, everything changed. She revealed the locations of 17 more Harbinger gates, scattered across the galaxy. Each one a potential doomsday weapon. Each one capable of displacing billions into eternal suffering. She shared everything. The history of the elder races, the dimensional sciences her people had mastered, the warning signs that a gate was approaching activation. Humanity could not ignore this, could not pretend the threat did not exist. The council voted to establish the Harbinger Initiative, a task force dedicated to finding and neutralizing the remaining gates. Katie Morrison resigned her fleet command to lead it. She said she had started this. She would see it through. Dr. Lisa Brennan signed on as Chief Science Officer. Her body still bore scars from void exposure, but her mind was sharper than ever. Commander Melissa Drake joined as Security Chief. She had seen the Covenant fleet trapped in eternal madness. She would ensure no one else suffered that fate. Dozens of other volunteers stepped forward, officers and scientists and engineers, humans who had witnessed what the void could do, who refused to let it threaten anyone else. Aelindra accepted their help. She taught them everything she knew, shared Aethel techniques for Dimensional navigation trained them in recognizing gate signatures. And slowly, very slowly, she began to believe, began to hope that perhaps she did not have to carry her burden alone anymore. On quiet nights, she stood on observation decks, staring at stars that held no answers. Sometimes she spoke to Vorethix, knowing he could not respond, thanking him for his sacrifice, promising to honor it by continuing their work. But sometimes, when she was very still and very quiet, she felt something, a warmth that should not exist, like the brush of silver fire against her mind, a presence vast and eternal, woven into the fabric of reality itself. Vorethix was not dead. He had become something else, something greater. His consciousness spread across dimensional boundaries, maintaining the seal on the gate, but aware, still watching over her. The dragon had kept his promise. She would not face the dark alone, not while he had consciousness to give. The Covenant fleet remained in the void, a grim reminder of the price of arrogance. But Elindra made a vow. When the other gates were sealed, when the threat was finally ended, she would find a way to free them. Even her enemies deserved better than eternal darkness. Katie Morrison walked beside her on the observation deck. The human placed a hand on the elf's shoulder. She said they would find a way. Together they would stop the remaining gates. Together they would honor those who sacrificed everything. Elindra smiled. The first genuine smile in 300 years. She said together, and meant it. The war had ended not with human victory, but with human compassion, with the choice to help a stranger, to trust someone different, to sacrifice for those they barely knew. That was what made humanity special. Not their weapons or their fleets, but their capacity to see suffering and choose to stop it, even at great cost. The Harbinger Initiative launched its first mission, heading toward the coordinates of the nearest gate. A team of humans and one ancient elf, working together to prevent catastrophe. Elindra stood at the viewport as they entered faster than light travel. She thought of Vorethix, of his final words, of the warmth she sometimes felt, and she knew with certainty that defied logic, that somewhere in the spaces between reality, a dragon consciousness hummed with approval, maintaining his eternal vigil, ensuring the darkness would never claim another soul. While he had awareness to give, the mission had just begun. But for the first time in 3 centuries, Elindra did not face it alone. She had allies, she had purpose, she had hope, and somewhere beyond the boundaries of normal space, a dragon of silver fire watched over them all, forever vigilant, forever faithful, forever protecting the friend who had saved him. Long ago under alien stars, when both of them had been lost and alone, now neither would ever be alone again. The galaxy was vast, the dangers were many, but together, human and aethel, mortal and eternal, they would face whatever came, and they would prevail. Because some bonds transcend species, transcend time, transcend even death itself. And those bonds, those precious connections forged in fire and sacrifice, those were what made existence worth protecting, worth fighting for, worth everything. The Valkyrie jumped to faster than light speed, carrying its crew toward unknown dangers, carrying hope into the darkness. And if you listened very carefully, if you were very still, you could almost hear it, the sound of silver fire burning in the fire. Void, the sound of a dragon keeping watch, the sound of friendship that would never end, not even at the edge of forever.